Well, good afternoon. Welcome to this lecture in the Mongolia Initiative series here at University of California, Berkeley. My name is Neil Jock. I'm a research fellow here at the Institute for International Studies, which is very pleased to co-sponsor this talk today. And it's a personal pleasure for me to be the person introducing Professor Robert Bedeski, because he was my mentor and master's thesis advisor several years, I dare say several decades ago, when I was at Carleton and back when Bob was at Carleton. It's also fitting because Bob is a UC Berkeley graduate. He did his PhD here in political science and got started on his work on China, which progressed into work on Korea, work on Mongolia, which brings him here today under the auspices of the Mongolia Initiative. So it's a real pleasure personally and institutionally to welcome Bob back to Berkeley. It's always nice to have prodigal sons returning to the campus, and he is a stellar prodigal son. You know about the Mongolia Initiative. You may not know all about Bob. I'll just give a little bit of highlight, and for additional information, of course, you can always look him up on the web. He's currently Professor Emeritus at the University of Victoria in Victoria, British Columbia. He's also an affiliate professor at the Jackson School of International Studies, University of Washington. That's named after Scoop Jackson, a former senator from the University of Washington. He was a throwback to the days when there was actually bipartisan agreement about certain issues, especially on foreign policy. Those of us who are in the middle on foreign policy issues miss Scoop Jackson quite a bit. So you have a lot of weight to carry representing Scoop Jackson. He is also the editorial advisor to the Mongolian Journal of International Affairs and holds an honorary doctorate from the Institute of International Studies of the Mongolia Academy of Sciences, so comes with a lot of first-hand experience on the topic. He's left Berkeley and became a teacher, professor at the university at Ohio State University. He then went from there to Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. From there, he then was offered a position at University of Victoria and continued his professorship there. He's also been a visiting scholar at different places, notably the visiting Aung San Suu Kyi Endowed Chair in Asian Democracy at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. He has countless publications across a whole range of outstanding journals in political science and area studies. A couple that I want to draw your attention to. Recently, a co-edited book on Eurasia's ascent in energy and geopolitics, rivalry or partnership for China, Russia, and Central Asia. Also, the transformation of South Korea, reform and reconstitution in the Sixth Republic under Rotae-Wu. More to the futures, scenarios for a landlocked state. This at the Stockholm Institute for Security and Development Policy, where he worked. Also, Genghis Khan, Mongolia, and the Theory of Human Security, which will be the basis for the talk today, published in the China and Eurasia Forum Quarterly. And then lastly, Human Security and the Chinese State, Historical Transformation and the Modern Quest for Sovereignty. So, Bob, welcome back to Berkeley. Please join me in welcoming him to this seminar.
Well, there's no greater pleasure than seeing a former student, one of my best students, I might add, at Carleton University. I'd like to thank the Institute of East Asian Studies and International Studies for arranging this presentation today. I'll be talking about Genghis Khan as he is described in The Secret History of the Mongols. This was a book that was put together shortly after Genghis Khan's death in 1227. And it was kind of an Old Testament and a New Testament. The Old Testament of this secret history consisted of stories of the clans, of his ancestors, how his father had kidnapped his mother out of a marriage cart. And the New Testament begins with the birth of Genghis Khan, how he survived some very formidable threats to his life and was able to create essentially a medieval modern state out of the rough materials of Mongolia. A humanist understanding of Genghis Khan requires an approach which transcends historical description psychological parsing, and materialist explanation. Two questions dominate the secret history. How was he able to survive in the frequently life-threatening environment of nomadic steppes? And secondly, how did the Mongol state emerge out of the unpromising conditions of tribal and impoverished warrior society? Both questions were approached pragmatically and empirically in the secret history. Empiricism as knowing and pragmatism as acting form the X and Y axes of the history. By plotting knowledge and action in response to life-ending threats, we gain an appreciation of Genghis Khan's survival dilemma, and by extension, man's in general. What I've done here is to sort of set the stage, a conceptual stage for understanding the stresses of Genghis Khan. Let me begin with an allegory. Suppose there's this cave, and there's a man in it, a hunter. And it's a tiger's lair. He didn't realize that he had camped in this. He is most vulnerable. Take the man in the first scenario. He's fallen asleep, and the tiger comes in. He has neither knowledge nor does he take any action against the tiger. In the second scenario, he's awake, but he's paralyzed by fear that he has knowledge but takes no action. In the third scenario, he recognizes the threat from the tiger, and he just flails, he picks up anything he can, throws it against the tiger. So we have no knowledge of what to do, but he takes action. And in the fourth scenario, the hunter has hunted tigers before, he knows what to do with them, he knows their weak spots, he has weapons prepared, so he has knowledge and he takes action. So he is least vulnerable here, most vulnerable in that case. I lay this out because the story of Genghis Khan that is narrated in the secret history is all about how Genghis Khan was able to survive and how he succumbed to his enemies, or to his enemies on occasion. Empiricism and pragmatism as knowledge and action permeate the secret history, narrating a central message of state formation around the survival of Temujin, who became Genghis Khan, and his acquisition of power to protect himself, his family, and his warriors and their families and clans. The first question I asked was about his longevity, and this can be reduced to the notion of security, a term we apply to states and nations, but one which traditionally referred to individuals. Since life is the fundamental property of an individual, and life is not possible without constant inputs of fluids, nutrition, shelter, and protection from predators, security can be defined as the sum of actions which sustain life. Individual human units comprise the molecules of society and state, consume security actions in order to prolong life and postpone death. Therefore, life security can be defined as prolonging life and postponing death. We've been very successful as human beings in developing or improving our life security. 10,000 years ago, life security was very vulnerable and populations were small. But as we progressed, as humanity gained knowledge, our numbers grew, and our ability to stay alive also improved. So what we had in 1950 particularly was a great leap forward, to use the Maoist term. This graph I put together by multiplying populations by the average age estimated at various points over a 10,000 year period. Another way of looking at it is to see how human security has improved by the coefficient of wealth. As wealth is a kind of buffer. Wealth is something that helps, that gives longevity by having access to resources and greater knowledge. The fundamental fact of human security is that humans are the architects of their own longevity. That is, in books on philosophical anthropology, one discovers that animals are complete. A robin is complete in his environment, whereas humans are always incomplete. We're always vulnerable. And so we concoct, we design, we create things or patterns that will improve our longevity. So life security can be precisely measured as the longevity of an individual. Below, I will illustrate with events in the life of Genghis Khan. All humans are born, live, and die attached to a state of nature in that longevity of mortal bodies is subordinate to metabolism. This is what I extracted from the Secret History. He lived a very perilous life, and starting from his birth through his death, approximately 61. These ages are just guesses. We don't know exactly when he was born, and I have a kind of actuarial estimation of his risk. His life risk. Here we find that his life risk was about 40%, and then his family was exiled from the Untitled clan, and he, his mother, his siblings, and a secondary wife had to live in basically a state of nature, herding and hunting and fishing and getting whatever they could, almost totally cut off from their relations. Then he gets support from a feudal lord, Togrul, and there are battles, and a couple of times he's wounded, comes very close to death, but he's saved by friends and so forth. So he lived a very dangerous life. This is basically up until his until the grand Kurultai of 1206, when the Mongolian state was formed. So we can see that this kind of estimation of the dangers to his life can be graphed in this manner. Looking at it differently, looking at the security inputs to his life, in his early life, descending as he gets advanced in years, mother and father, of course, were the prime sources of security and protection for him. And then, as a young teenager, his father is poisoned by Tatars, and his mother is widowed. They are exiled by their clan. Their equipment and horses, their herds are taken away from them, except for 9 horses. And so he's very vulnerable at this point. As he advances in age, he gets children. His mother becomes less important as the sole source of protection. He marries his wife. His wife Berta becomes very important in his life. At the same time, as I said, we are all the architects of our own security. As he learns, as he advances in age, he becomes more skilled in staying alive, acquiring friends and colleagues and warrior friends. Organic society, that is, the tribes and clans, are another source of knowledge and support for him. But the big leap comes when the state is formed. That is, by having a corps of bodyguards, by having organized army, he is able to survive much longer. In fact, he dies a natural death, which was totally unpredictable given the basis of his early life. So human evolution constructed nuclear families which form the basis of clans and tribes. From these men constructed states primarily for the sake of enhancing life security. A concentration of power and control was summarized in the concept of sovereignty, a supremacy that mimicked the paterfamilias in the family and the supreme being in religion. Thomas Hobbes described the sovereign as the keeper and guardian of the social contract, wherein men partially surrendered their right of self-defense in exchange for the collective protection by the state. A powerful metaphor, but Hobbes ignored the intermediate step, which created pre-state life community, a vital stage for evolution of all states. Just a sidelight, this is the conquests that Genghis Khan and his armies made during his lifetime. The Mongols started in this obscure corner of Siberia, or of Mongolia, expanded in different directions. Batu and groups were sent to scout new territories, conquering some of the tribes of Central Asia and present-day Afghanistan, as well as Uzbekistan. So during his lifetime, from a very impoverished and threatened tribe, expanded into all these areas, conquering the Kyrgyz, the Tanguts, the Uyghurs. Actually, the Uyghurs submitted peaceably to the Mongols. As I mentioned, the life community was intermediate between the individual and the state. The life community was built on tribes, or built from tribes and clans, which in turn were based on the nuclear family, father, mother, siblings, children, and so forth. And by extending these familial relations, one acquired the clan. Now, the clan was much more than a social organization. It was highly useful in protection, predation on others, and these clans would join into tribes. So this is just a graphic representation of a kind of organic society that existed. What Genghis Khan did was to harden the structure of the Mongolian clans and tribes, and to instead of fighting each other, that was the problem. They were constantly at war. It was kind of a state of nature that Hobbes had described, where it was the war of one against all. And what Genghis Khan did was to orient them all for a common purpose, which was, of course, to destroy the enemy, to steal their women and their horses, and to take over whatever wealth they could. So as he gathered these warriors into an army, there had to be some means of sustaining them. And of course, raids and conquests were what they were good at. But in the process, there's a kind of physical analogy. If you take a magnet, what is a magnet but a piece of iron where the molecules have been aligned in certain directions? That's basically what Chinggis Khan did. He aligned the clans and the warriors into a common direction so that they could have this force. At the same time, formed boundaries between them and others. So within this very hard boundary that defined the Mongols, and in 1206 he declared himself Khan of all the peoples that live in the Ger, that lived in the tents, in the felt tents. So they define themselves in a certain way. There's a certain, if we compare this with the modern totalitarian state, where clans and tribes have been liquidated, you have individuals who are also lined up in the same way that Genghis did to the Mongols. But these are individuals in a very hard state boundary around them, a party apparatus to serve the purpose of keeping order and conformity, and a supreme leader. So there's a rough analogy between the early Mongol state and modern totalitarianism. This is the book, or this is one of the many translations of The Secret History. It is it's done in 3 volumes with copious notes and descriptions. It's probably the definitive translation, which is very well done. Another version of the Secret History was a Chinese version, and here you can see the linguistic obstacles that these early translators faced. First of all, one would have to know the medieval pronunciation of these Chinese characters, and also have familiarity with medieval Mongol language in order to translate this. Here, I just pointed out the Chinggis Khan is about as close as you can get in Chinese to Genghis Khan, or Chinggis Khan, as the better phoneticization would have it. Just another excursion here. A few years ago, there's a mega statue of Chinggis Khan, which is done in stainless steel, and here you can see humans get a sense of the scale. So there's a kind of cult of Chinggis Khan that has emerged since the end of the Soviet Union, since the end of communist rule in Mongolia. Amanda, do you remember what year this was made?
It's like
was it around 2000 or something? Was it?
2005.
2005, yeah. Yeah, I visited there, and you can climb up and you can get up on the horse and so forth. There's also Chinggis Khan vodka and Chinggis Khan hotels. There's a great deal of usage of his name. There's also the recognition of the importance of the secret history. I visited this secret history camp, and they have exhibitions of various editions, I think there was some original ones there. In a sense, the secret history is a kind of constitution of Mongolia. That is, it doesn't prescribe laws, but what it does is describe how Mongolia came into being. It's kind of a preamble to a constitution, in the sense that it defines Mongolian identity, and it is held with very high regard today. Well, here you can see the extent of the Mongol Empire after the death of Genghis Khan, extending into Korea. There were two attempts to invade Japan. These were foiled by the kamikaze, by the sacred wind, hurricanes, typhoons. The Mongols, of course, began up here, Lake Baikal. There was the conquest of China. The Song dynasty was destroyed by the Mongols, and after his death, the Mongol Empire was divided into various hordes, and horde is a rendition of encampment, basically, but it means the empire. The son Jochi was given the territories that comprise Russia today, and another son was given Iran and parts of Syria and Iraq. There was an incursion into India, but it was not pursued, and India never became part of the Mongol Empire. However, a descendant of Genghis Khan, Babur, founded the Mughal dynasty. Mughal, of course, comes from Mongol. There was another so-called or alleged descendant of Genghis Khan, Tamerlane, who established another empire in Central Asia. So his impact, both by what he did and his descendants, had a major impact on Eurasia, which I'll refer again to later. Getting back to the theory that I was able to tease out of the secret history, I term this Anthrocentric Security Theory. Anthrocentric because it's based on what humans do. It originates with human actions, And there are three strata of being, or levels of existence, that I find in the secret history that are indirectly hinted. First, there's the state of nature, which is what Hobbes referred to, which the Enlightenment philosophers saw as the basic condition of humanity before civil society emerged. And the second level of existence is life community. This would be the tribes and the clans where people come together, but it's not individual, it's based on blood relations. And then third, the state is a next higher level, which is based on law, on sovereignty, on territory, and on a certain amount of force. Within each of these states or stratum, within each stratum of being, I discovered that there are security action platforms. That is, there are the closest analogy I can think of is that these are platforms that are built higher and higher, and each platform, I found a total of 15 of these, and I find events and incidents that very graphically, or I should say very poignantly, tell how security actions were launched. So first there had to be the state of nature, and this is essentially consisted of the individual will to life, the family, practical knowledge, and the natural environment, which included their own bodies. The life community consists of multiple persons interacting, cooperating, having conflicts, and so forth. And at this level of existence, we find the will to freedom. That is freedom. This is a Marxist term, I take the Marxist meaning. That is freedom from harsh necessity. That is, people don't want to be constantly looking for food and water and protection. Life community, tribes, clans enables cooperation so that there's a division of labor, that some people can specialize in something, others will act as guardians. Cultural knowledge, including language, social obligation, loyalty was extremely important, particularly stressed by Genghis Khan in his warrior bands. By social concord, I mean peace, order, end of conflict, end of fighting. And at the state level, there are 6 platforms that I've identified. Political obligation, a state economy, political knowledge, coercive institutions, which is essentially an army, political concord, and external relations. So these 15 security platforms provide the context of the actions which preserved or which protected the life of Genghis Khan in the secret history. Some of the postulates of the Anthrocentric Security Theory are: first, all human life consists of individual birth, a life of creating and consuming security actions, and an end to that life. Secondly, all humans have a mortal soul, which consists of the will to life, will to freedom, and the will to power. Each stratum of being discovers or creates platforms from which security actions are launched. These actions may be positive or negative, depending on their effect on the lives of self and others. Taking this a little bit further, I was curious to see whether I could quantify this human security, or this life security action. I take the 15 platforms. This is at in the state of nature. Add these together. These were protections of the individual, and I get the life security sub n. And then I take the sub n, the LSN down here, added to the other platforms, and I get life security sub L. Then I bring that down here, and add the platforms that were introduced by the state. The gist of all this is that a person living in the state is much more secure than a person living in a state of nature, and the life community level of existence is obviously in between. The other temptation that comes in here, can I quantify this? I tried assigning a unitary value to each of these platforms. Gives me a sum of 15. What 15 means, that is, if all these platforms are working perfectly, then one should be immortal. That is, if you have perfect security, then there's no reason to die. You should be protected from everything. So far, nobody's been able to attain that score. And the other thing is that these have varying weights, not only in terms of their importance, but also in terms of time. Sometimes foreign relations are more important than others. But the fundamental element is this will to live, which I borrowed from Schopenhauer. Finally, the final postulate is that the unit of human protection is the security action monad, consisting of a single act or a set of actions launched within a level of existence or stratum of being a security action platform for the purpose of protecting or destroying one or more human lives. Human history consists of trillions and trillions of security monads and will be required until the last human life. This term security monad is something I borrowed from the philosopher Spinoza, who in his metaphysics, he considers the universe to consist of monads, of actions, of interactions, and I've applied that to this. Okay, now taking this theory and deconstructing the secret history, I devised this template for analyzing various incidents. First, I look at the stratum of being, whether it's the state of nature or the life community or the state. And next, anyhow, I use this template to go through. The first one was when Temujin kills his half-brother, Bektir. This occurred after the death of Temujin's father, Yesugei, and the exile of the family into the wilds, where they have to survive by themselves. So they were in the state of nature, and Bektir stole some fish, and he stole a bird that had been killed by Temujin, and used it for his own meals. Families can be pressure cookers in which rivalry and conflict erupt, sometimes fatally. Fraternal solidarity was a fragile though vital necessity and not a constant feature. Bektir was older than Temujin, and though not a descendant of Yesugei's principal wife, he threatened Temujin's primacy within the family. This incident of fratricide had several elements manifesting the character of Temujin and has broader implications for human life security. First, this incident was a microcosm of the wars he would fight in later life. He believed in the justice of his action in killing his half-brother. A stronger party, that is Bektir, had stolen what was rightfully his, and nobody, not even his mother, would intervene to fix the injustice. Appealing to the stronger party with reason and compromise had no prospect of success for Temujin. Only the elimination of Bektir seemed to resolve the conflict. Temujin decided to be judge, jury, and executioner in settling his grievance. Secondly, his younger brother Kasar had been jointly deprived of their catch, and was a perfect ally. An alliance of 2 against 1 accomplished the murder with dispatch. Third, alone in the wilderness, there was no sovereign body to enforce laws or customs, and each man boy had to look out for himself or be deprived of the essentials of life preservation. Fourth, appeals by the mother to prudence and the practicality of preserving family unity fell on deaf ears. Their grievance was immediate, and retribution would be far off. Finally, Bektir, the oldest male in the family, would claim to be the formal head, and Temujin's act removed him as chief rival. So, in this virtual state of nature, we have a situation that might be described as before good and evil, before these values of good and evil had much traction. In the second incident, Berta, the new wife of Temujin, is kidnapped by Merkit tribesmen. It was partly in revenge because his father had kidnapped the fiancée of a Merkit by the name of Chilidu. So they came and they kidnapped Berta, carried her off, and she was made the wife of the brother of one of the tribesmen. So in order to get his wife back, Temujin went to Togrul, who was the chief of the Kariat tribe, and he had earlier given a very valuable sable coat to Togrul, and Togrul agrees, okay, we will jointly attack the Merkit, but I want you to get Jamuka, who was a blood brother of Temujin, to join in the campaign. So the three of them join their armies, they attack the Merkit, they take back Berta, they destroy the Merkit, or they scatter them, and the friendship of Jamuka and Temujin is renewed. They live happily together for 18 months. Then there was an argument over where the herds should be foddered, and they split. And this becomes a big thing later. Other incidents arise, and they are deadly enemies. And only after wars between Temujin and Jamuka are settled does Temujin emerge as Genghis Khan. There's also fighting between Temujin and Togrul. Eliminating him also elevates Genghis Khan. So the whole thing is about the protection of Temujin, the protection of his family, that is based upon his relations, his social relations with this feudal chieftain. Yeah, in this one, they're at the level of, this is after 1206, after the state is established. One of the first things that Genghis Khan does after announcing himself as Genghis Khan is to organize a bodyguard corps. And this also is for his protection. He himself speaks in the secret history as protection of his golden life. That is, he sees himself as the sovereign being, and that he not only is a symbol of the state, but he is the state. That if he goes, then all that has been accomplished by him and his warriors will dissipate like the dew in the early morning sun. The interesting thing about this bodyguard organization is that it is very detailed. The duties of the night guards, of the day guards, of the quiver bearers, of the bull bearers, very, very much in detail, which is in contrast to everything else. And it may be the only extant version of what passed for laws. Genghis Khan is famous for the promulgation of the Asa, the law code of the Mongols, but we don't have any extant copy. This organization of the bodyguards was so important because, on the one hand, it would protect him from assassination or poisoning or other kinds of harm, and also this corps of bodyguards was made up of sons of warriors and generals, and they were kind of hostages to their father's good behavior. Also, it became a kind of military academy where these stewards and quiver bearers also were groomed to be generals and aristocrats in the Mongol state. Anyhow, here's the conclusion. In this paper, I lay out a theory of human life security with universal ramifications, using detailed illustrations of the secret history of the Mongols. I believe the approach offers a more scientific approach by the existential inversion of normal political discourse. The existential approach asks a single question: how does a single human sustain his life? Philosophical anthropology offers some clues and categories, but stops short of exploring the state and civil society as strata of being. The Anthrocentric Security approach is more penetrating and requires establishment of an ontological hierarchy. And this hierarchy consists of the following. First, that which is tangibly real. That is, Descartes, cogito ergo sum. That is, I know I exist because I can reason. So that's reality. Then there's another level of ontology, the consensually real, the person. Maggie Thatcher famously said that there is no such thing as a society. Well, it's not a thing, but we all consent that it does agree. So it has a kind of a lower level of reality. And the third level is the legally and conceptually real. That is the state. And the role of subject and ruler is what we call people within this context. We know that the state does not exist as a thing. It is nothing we can touch. It is a kind of enforced illusion. That is, we have to believe in it, and we mostly do. Finally, there's a tentative reality of civil society, which creates the role of citizen, who combines the above three strata of being and who remains a derivative being. That is, as citizens, if we consider ourselves human citizens, this reality is derived from whatever we have accomplished in the past in terms of the strata of being. So in civil society, this would be we who live in contemporary society. Finally, or not quite finally, the AST postulates that man's primary motivation is to remain alive, and that he has constructed life communities and states to reinforce his ability to serve longevity. The life of Genghis Khan compresses a process which took centuries in most other countries, a result of single-generation state formation, a stable civilization, and a civil society. Nonetheless, the Mongol conquests affected much of Eurasia, destroying old kingdoms and altering trade routes. The Golden Horde was the umbrella under which the Russian state emerged, and assimilated some of its features in later tsaardoms. Mongol threats, depredations, destructions, occupation, and imitators were major factors in evolution of the of various Asian states as they emerged from medieval semi-feudalism into absolute modernity, or absolutist modernity. A fuller understanding of traditional and contemporary Asia, as well as Russia, must include consideration of the Mongol impact. And finally, Anthrocentric Security Theory provides a method and a framework based on philosophical anthropology upon which a scientific analysis of the human condition can be undertaken. It postulates a unit for measuring life security, that is, the human life year, and examines the quantity of these units to discover the inputs and outputs directly affecting the aggregate quantity. The length of every human life is determined by the number, timeliness, and quality of security context. The individual responses to threat and opportunity are a combination of action and knowledge. Biographies of famous persons provide a rich trove of life security data. Moreover, a subjective know thyself introspection can even be more revealing. In closing, without life security, there can be no life, no liberty, and no happiness. Thank you.
When you mentioned civil society, in the context of the world that Genghis Khan knew, would the parallel in that society be herders who were not warriors? Was there a civil society other than the warrior, than his warriors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think that a civil society was created by the Mongols. I think that what you have is a state that had all the components of coercion, of governance, but these rules were not assimilated into the people. To have a civil society, I think you have to have citizens, people who have the power to affect government. And you do have a state, a prelude to civil society in the Mongol Empire. The civil societies that existed under various Khans, for example, in China, China since the Han Dynasty at least had a civil society that the rules, the laws were assimilated into people's behavior. Institutions were accepted. In Iran, in Persia, you have the semblance of a civil society. But in Mongolia, it took much longer than the empire to create a civil society. And plus the fact that civil societies usually require cities. The Mongol experiment in city construction at Karakoram was a failure. I mean, a city was built in the Mongolian steppes, and it was artificial. It had to be supplied from outside. It was not self-sustaining. It was not a market center as other cities have been. So the Mongol state essentially preserved this quality of being an army state. It was an army on the move, and the longevity of the Golden Horde over Russia, 250 years, was due in large part by farming out various activities of the state, and by always having the possibility of destruction and terror in reserve as a backup to enforce its rules. Yes, sir.
I'm interested in as I understand from the secret history, the Genghis Khan established this relationship with Tengri, the sky god, who gave him two rules. One, protect the Mongols, and two, bring the whole world under your sword. And I've thought a lot about that idea. We would have no trouble in the Middle East if he had been successful for a longer period of time. The idea of getting security and maybe thinking about his family out with nothing, the way to get security is to tell people, I'm the boss, and I will now be secure, because as I understand it, like you said, the Uyghurs, he let them keep, and maybe the Tangus, he let them keep their government, their religion, everything. He just said, just give me supplies when I need them, and give me homage. So I'm wondering if underneath the security business, if you're looking at it psychologically, that's the way to be secure. Whether you're the Roman Empire or the Egyptian, to be secure is beat everyone else up.
That's very fascinating. There's two things going on. One is that you're right that Genghis Khan devoted himself to Tengri, to the sky god, if you will, and saw that his fate was tied up with the will of God. On the one hand, he saw himself as a passive creature, but on the other hand, he acted as if he were in complete control. In the conquests of Russia, of China, of Persia, and of Uzbekistan, religion was preserved. In fact, when a refugee from the Cariats set up a regime and converted from the Tengri religion to Buddhism and tried to impose this Buddhism on his population, that gave the Mongols an excuse to intervene and remove him and to make that. But they essentially preserved the religions. And in fact, the Ilkhanate in Persia, I think it was the grandson of Genghis Khan, converted to Islam. Religions were not interfered with too much because they were important for maintaining this order. So this model that you kind of describe of using force to preserve order worked with the Mongols. But at the same time, the common people and the ecclesiastical structures, whether it's Russia or any other place, were preserved as a means of accommodating the customs and beliefs of people. So the Mongols were not the Muslims. They did not impose their religion on conquered peoples because the religions were useful. In the case of Russia, the Orthodox Church served as tax collectors for the Mongols. They would collect the tax, and so this is a reasonable and acceptable situation. They acted essentially as secular rulers, and they as long as they kept the upper hand, they maintained a semblance of order. Nevertheless, even with the techniques of terrorism that were often used in Russia under the Mongols, there were hundreds of rebellions, of mutinies, of foreign attacks. So I don't think there's any guarantee of any formula for peace and order as a continuing context.
Did you read in Mongolian or?
No, just I came to this project very late in life, and I tried learning Mongolian, but it's a very difficult language.
So in my experience, I read both in English and Mongolian. Mongolian was so hard to understand.
Mm-hmm.
But the English was better for me to understand. Just
Some very bright people and hardworking people have translated this. There are a number of translations in print. I chose this one as the best. But what I'm really interested in is the narrative, the story, and the lessons that can be derived from it. I think even though I may not get the literal meaning of some of these things, thank you. But the story is fascinating, and there are films. There have been numerous films in Chinese, in Russian, in Kazakh, and in English that have replicated the story of the secret history. But I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to see what lessons are there for understanding security, understanding politics, because I was not able to find any political interpretation of the secret history. There's a number of historical interpretations, but nothing that will give the sense of how this relates to the ideas of politics or to philosophy. And I think one of the problems, as a practitioner of political science, I think that there is a paucity, there is an absence of serious study of the Asian state. The Asian state is described, and of course we take it from a very pragmatic standpoint that yes, China is a state, India is a state, and so forth. But understanding the difference between the American European state from the Asian state, I think Genghis Khan is a good place to start. I think that the Mongol state absorbed Chinese ideas, absorbed Central Asian ideas, Muslim ideas. For example, one of the in describing the birth of Chinggis Khan, he's supposed to have been born with a blood clot in his hand. This is also, but if you read the Quran also says that that mankind was created out of a blood clot by Allah. So, you know, you can find different things. And also there's certain Christian elements in the secret history as well. And there's a school of philosophy in Russia today that it's called Eurasianism. And the Eurasianist idea is that Russia is distinct from Asia and it's distinct from Europe, that it has a great deal of Asianism in it, but it is different.
Yeah, because Russia, half of Russia is, has an Asian country. I mean, Asian territory.
Right.
The land.
Well, it's not only territorial, but the fact that the Mongols ruled Russia for 250 years. And when Ivan the Terrible began his conquests into Kazan and Astrakhan, he absorbed, or he legitimated himself in terms of Chinggisid values, that he was named as the Khan of Kazan and he became the Khan of Astrakhan and so forth. And even up until, many of the Romanovs were descendants of Chinggis. And so this whole idea of, and even the Chinese would accept the idea that the Yuan dynasty, which was a Mongol dynasty, was actually a Chinese dynasty. So a lot of these values of the Mongol conquest were absorbed into these societies. Anything else? Yes, sir.
You use the term theory for what you've presented here. Now, I can see it as a taxonomy of actions, and the way you presented it, I can see how you could describe these actions in terms of this taxonomy.
Right.
I'm not sure why anyone else, why you expect that anyone else would want to choose this particular way of categorizing. And when you call it a theory, I'm not sure what predictions you think that it would make. For instance, is it a theory in the sense that it could be empirically falsified? I'm not sure what your aim is in making this into a theory rather than simply one way of analyzing.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that very much. In fact, I have a book-length manuscript that I've posted online, and I do look at some of these questions. But very briefly, I consider it a theory because of the ontology. That is, I begin with the human individual, and how do you protect human life? And security answers this. And society is derivative on the needs for protecting life. And the state is also a derivative from from these three wills that I have identified. So the challenge in terms of finding the empirical validation, the challenge would be to locate the manifestations of the will to live, the will to freedom, the will to power. So in that sense, there is a hierarchy that is presented as a rule. That is, in contemporary political science, we take the state as a given. Well, it's not a given. It's something that has evolved over years. And it's a kind of, what this is a kind of theory of evolution, that we have evolved as humans from state of nature into life communities, into the state, and into civil society. So it's the sequence that I think is the core of the theory. Historical studies can validate this or invalidate it, but I think that's where it is. Yes, sir.
I wonder, wouldn't the philosophy of Genghis Khan being through all stages, being outlined with his family, and then getting together a small state, and then getting this huge empire, doing all that. The secret history doesn't seem to really tell you much. Do you think the tomb of Genghis Khan might fill in those gaps, and you'd have a perfect example of someone who survived all three stages, and whether it's because of protection or because of that's what the God told him or whatever.
Yeah. We don't have to open the tomb. I think the secret history, if you can tease out these ideas, because the first in my manuscript, I look at when Temujin was captured by the Tayachut, and he's held in bondage, and he has to make a decision: am I going to try to escape, or am I going to be a permanent slave of these people? And you can see him how this will to power, or excuse me, will to live, manifests itself in his escape from this. And there are other incidents that no other people were involved, but you get a very clear picture of his personality as an independent actor, that he is going to be the architect of his life. That is the will to life. And then you see how he interacts with his relatives, with his kinsmen, both in conflicts and in cooperation. Here we have the life community. And then you see him as commander, you see him as organizer of government, a kind of lycurgus figure, a lawgiver, and here he is as the statesman, as the person who is manifesting this will to power. So I think it's in there. I don't think we have to do any kind of psychological speculation. It's on the. Those were some of the factors I think that produced the victories that he had. Some of these wars were fought over many decades, or over several decades. It was not merely a single campaign or a single battle, city after city. But as these cities were won, and as the booty and pillage became evident, they were joined by others. So pretty soon it wasn't only Mongols, but other itinerant nomads would join warriors with the same kind of skills. The challenge was to weld them into cohesive units, to train them, and to constantly have maneuvers so that they would they would act as a single force. It was very successful in that. The other thing was the very endurance of these warriors. They and their horses were used to fighting in very frigid winters, and when Batu led his armies into Russia, nobody fights in the wintertime but the Mongols, and they would be able to cross swamps, rivers, streams that were frozen, and so they captured Moscow and Tver and all the cities of southern Russia, destroyed Kiev. And then the spring thaw started happening, and so they couldn't go further north into Novgorod. They gave up on Novgorod, which stayed. Action would be spread far and wide, and people would surrender rather than to submit to that kind of thing. As far as the global warming or the climate change thesis, I've seen references to that, but I think it's still up for debate. I'm not quite sure. There are many other factors that would explain the expansion of the Mongols besides climate change.
Well, a whole study was made, as you I'm sure ran into, of what the weather was during this time, and the weather was very wet, relatively speaking, since every Mongol warrior had 4 horses. You got 100,000 warriors. That's a lot of horses to feed. And apparently that was their whole conclusion, that if it was a dry season or a dry era, he'd have never made it.
Certainly the availability of grass was critical, and the Mongols got as far as Hungary, and Silesia actually, and they might have gone further into Europe. They might have cut short any possibility of a Renaissance and Reformation and Enlightenment. But one of the odd stories of history, of course, is that the Khan Ugadai died, and all the generals thought it would be better to go back home and participate in the election that was going to take place. So Europe was saved. The Mongols were primed to invade from Afghanistan into India. But the prospects of hot weather and muggy climate were discouraging, so India remained independent of the Mongols. But certainly climate was a factor, but I think that there are other explanations that would do as well so far. Okay. Kimberly?
Just a comment, you mentioned before that you had found actually Christian elements in the history of the Mongols. I'm wondering where those would have come from. Was it just sort of individuals that they encountered, or was it from Armenia, encountering Armenia, or?
It was Nestorians.
Nestorian?
Togrul, the chief of the Kiryat, was a Nestorian. And also descendants of Chinggis Khan, queens and so forth, were also Nestorian. So it did, Christianity did penetrate into those areas, but it wasn't a major factor, I think. Okay, well, thank you all very much.